I'm going live, everybody. So we are live. Hello and welcome to Courageous Conversations with the community of Reconcilers, an initiative of Remerge. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. I am going to add myself here. Hi, everyone. So glad to have you on. Let me bring up all of our speakers here. So today we're going to have a panel discussion about having a courageous conversation. So at the present moment, I am going to bring in all of our speakers here. Just give me one moment to add everyone to the screen. So hi, everyone. If you could unmute yourself and just say hi, wave to the people.
Hello.
Hi. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, everyone. So, this is Juneteenth week, and I am very excited to be having this. I've actually wanted to do this for the last 2 years. So, this conversation has been 2 years in the making, and we have a wonderful, illustrious panel that I'm going to introduce here in a second. But I wanted to just kind of let you all know how this was going to go. So, we're going to start off. I'm going to introduce each panelist, and they're going to kind of tell you about the organizations that they're with, just a really quick introduction of who they are, what organization they are with. And then I'll talk about how I wanted to do this, how this came about. And then I'm going to have each of them kind of tell a little bit more on why they're passionate about their work, how they got into reconciliation. So on our panel, we have Dan Crain. All of these are my good friends, so I'm so excited to have them on. Dan Crain. We have Kristin Hemingway, Corey Lee, and Claire Necessary. So glad to have each of these on. So this conversation came about where I was actually at a business meeting with Corey. And I was at a business meeting with Corey, and a woman came in from the Daughters of the Confederate. And so, for you all who don't know who the Daughters of the Confederate are, they are an organization of daughters whose ancestors were part of the Confederate Army in the Civil War. And at this time, I was working at Morehouse College, which is a historically Black college here in Atlanta, Georgia, all male school. And I had on my Morehouse jacket. And after we did our introductions, the very first question she asked me was, are your students racist against white people? Now, anyone who knows me knows that my background is very Afrocentric, and I'm a very blunt person. So I had to gather myself. And I said, no, that is not what we teach them at Morehouse. And then Corey jumped in and took over the conversation. And Corey was so honest with her and direct with her, but he did it with such grace and such love that by the end of the conversation, she was like, wow, I never thought about it like that. And so it wasn't necessarily where we changed her opinion in that moment, but we at least got to the point where she could see that there was another perspective that she needs to consider. And I told Corey that day, I'm like, yo, you need to teach a class on that. Like what you just did was absolutely amazing. So I have a panel of wonderful people who have been doing this reconciliation work for years, for a long time. They have all had experiences with having hard, challenging conversations. And so they're going to talk to us tonight about the challenges they've had and the things they've seen that has worked in having these courageous conversations. And then we're going to share a resource. We're using a resource actually from the King Center that's called Beloved Community Talks, and we'll share that resource at the end. So I'm going to do ladies first and come back around. So if we could start with Claire, if you could just introduce yourself on who you are, what organization you're with, how you got into reconciliation work and why this is important to you.
Yeah, sure. My name is Claire Necessary, and I actually just recently moved. In the middle of the pandemic, we moved from Atlanta, and now we're in Southern Alabama, a place called Dothan, Alabama, it's been an adjustment, but I'm fortunate to have already been connected with a lot of really great people who are already doing anti-racism work. So that's been great for me to kind of be a part of, even, down here, even after just moving. But I work with an organization called Be the Bridge, which is a ministry that it centers around racial literacy, racial education, and then creating resources and curriculum for being in conversations and relationship around racial justice and racial reconciliation. So the heart of it is gathering with people who are not like you, creating groups, heterogeneous groups, and having very, courageous, and heart conversations around, all the uncomfortable things that have to do with whiteness and race. And it's funny, I was just thinking about this today because to answer your question about how you first got into, really racial reconciliation, anti-racism work, I, for a long time, was just kind of, it's always been on my radar, but there was a moment in time, and it was it was during the Charleston massacre, which, is like tomorrow is the anniversary. So I was thinking about it a lot today, and I do think that was a moment in my life that I kind of switched from I switched to a more active anti-racism life in that moment. It's kind of one of those things that I can point back to, and it was a very, I say sacred moment. But so ever since then, I'm a continuous learner and listener, and I try to help people have these conversations, especially white people, along the way with all of their whiteness hangups, get to the heart of things. So yeah, that's me I guess in a nutshell.
I was muted. Okay, no one can hear me. Kristin, can you hear me?
Now.
Okay, Kristin, you're up next. If you could just share who you are, sorry, what organization you're with, and how you got into this work and why it's important to you.
So I am Kristin Hemingway. I am actually not currently with any specific organization, but this is work I've been deeply passionate about for years. I have experience in working in multiple organizations and doing different activities around race and racial reconciliation. I kind of fell into this type of conversation. I attended an HBCU. I went to Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida, which is right across the street from FSU. And so I've been engaging in these kind of conversations actually pretty much since I was in high school, when I would participate in programs and activities, and I'd be the one little Black girl in the corner. I'm not really an in the corner person, but I would be the one Black girl and handling different types of conversations. And I remember very specifically when I knew that this would be an ongoing conversation in my life. Is the summer before my senior year of high school, I participated in a program at a small college in Indiana. And my roommate was a young white girl. She was from Washington State. And we had to have like a whole thing because in our 2 weeks together in the program, we had this very large racial incident. And she was my roommate. So it got a little iffy at one point. But at 17, I had to learn how to navigate really, really hard conversations with people and learn how to listen, even when it was something I did not want to hear. But it was also a process of being able to educate and to share story and perspective and truth so that we could all be better on the other side of it. That evolved as time went on, and I began to work with young people, students in particular, and began helping them navigate these conversations amongst their peers. And I'll say this, it was working with students that prepared me to work with adults in this conversation because of the amount of patience and the amount of grace necessary to talk with a 13 or 14-year-old about racism and racial prejudice and privilege and have a healthy and productive conversation. It's those exact same skills that I needed to have those conversations with adults. And I'll be super honest, I admit that I was greatly lacking in with adults. And God just kind of showed me that all of the things I said with these kids, all of the ways I was able to sit and listen and share and have a heart of understanding that we just had different lived experiences. And that colors just a lot of how you move in the world. I had to bring that to the table with adults. And it was not fair for me to expect them to be different simply because they were older. So it's what keeps me in the work, even when it's tiring, even when it's frustrating. I recognize I can tap pause when I need to because taking care of me is priority one. But to come back to re-engage with fresh perspective, an open and kind heart, a listening ear, and a willingness to speak truth to power.
So awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Dan the man, you're up next. If you could just share with us who you are, what organization you're with, how you got into this work, and why it's important to you.
Yeah, my name's Dan Crain. My claim to fame is I'm just friends with Corey and Jade Lee. That's my claim to fame. No, I work for a group called the One Race Movement here in Atlanta as the director of groups and mobilization. That actually Corey and Jade helped start One Race years ago, and so very grateful to them for starting this. And so I've been on this journey for 15 years, learning, repenting, acknowledging, submitting, and I'm actually I'm a white farm boy from a place called Bumpville, PA, true place, and live in Atlanta, in historic South Atlanta, majority African American community, and we're a mile from where Rayshad Brooks was shot and murdered Friday night, and so it's been a really, really heavy. It's been a heavy past month, but just since Friday night, it's been really, really heavy in our community. And so, yeah, for me, what spurs me on is it's all rooted with God and His heart to reconcile all things through Jesus, and Jesus' prayer for John 17 that the church may be one, and it's clearly we're not one. We're not on the same page. White supremacy has just so ravaged our country, and the church has been complicit in that. And so I'm really passionate about that and calling the church to be what it's called to be, and to really focus on real, true reconciliation and not mess around with it, and have real, honest conversations. And so, married to a wonderful woman, we have 4 children, and many other kids, many other young men that we call children as well. But yeah, that's who I am.
Awesome. So glad to have you, Dan. And Dan is the reason I'm in this work. I'll give my introduction after everyone else. All right. Up next, Corey, my Hamptonian brother. Corey, if you could tell us who you are, what organization you're with, how you got in this work, and why it's important to you. We cannot hear you, Corey. We cannot hear you at all. We can't hear you. Oh no. Okay, so while we're working on your audio, I'll give my introduction. Lavonya Jones. I am the facilitator for the community of reconcilers under Remerge, and so thankful for this platform. You all encourage me so much. And I'll go ahead and share Corey's introduction because I know him. So Corey is my Hampton brother. We went to college together at Hampton University, historically Black college and university in Hampton, Virginia. And that's where I met him and Jade. We all went to college together. They moved to Atlanta the year before I did to plant a church here, Courageous Church Movement, which is a wonderful church where they minister to a lot of young people, a lot of students. They actually started in the Atlanta University Center area where Morehouse, Spelman, and Clark Atlanta are. And then I moved back here from Virginia after graduate school in 07. And so I have supported their work since we've been in college. We were in ministry together in college. When I moved here, I found out, that they had a church here. So have always tried to support what they were doing. As Dan stated, they were integral in starting One Race. And so we have Corey back. I'm going to bring him up, add him back to the stream here and unmute him. Corey, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay. So I told everyone how I met you. So you could go ahead with your introduction.
Sure. So thanks for saving me there. So my name is Corey Lee, and I am famous for being married to Jade Lee, who is an amazing woman. But I am the co-founder of Convergence Movement, and basically our heart is to unite the body of Christ across cultures, across denominations, across generations, to launch influencers from college campuses to inner cities to the ends of the earth. And kind of the way we desire to do that is to model and establish healthy relationships. So we're very deeply rooted in relationship. I'm also a trainer for the relational values team. And basically it's a national team that teaches and trains people on basically the values or the core essentials to relationships, relational language, how to listen well, how to care for people well, how to be compassionate. And so that work takes me to a lot of interesting places. It kind of manifests itself in different ways, in marriage coaching, premarital coaching, general relational well-being. It can also work in the conversation about racial reconciliation as well. So there's some basic core values about relationships that work well. There's relational language that works well. So that's kind of that's a few of the things that are relevant to this conversation that I'm doing. As far as how I got involved in this work of racial reconciliation, I was born into it. I grew up in a small town in Kansas. Yes, there are Black people in Kansas. And I was one of them. I was a small town in Kansas, and I grew up knowing about racism. I didn't have to hear it from the media or anything else. It was my experience. I remember the first time I got called the N-word. In those days, I mean, I was a little kid. I was small, and in those days, the way that I fought is quite different than the way I do now. Then I used my hands, and I learned that that's not going to get me anywhere. So I had to learn how to outthink and have conversations. And so that's kind of what got me involved. I think there's a series of events that have kept me involved. I've been involved in Heritage Panel since I was in middle school and in high school, having those kind of conversations. And then my junior year in high school, I watched the movie Rosewood. For those that aren't familiar, it's about a town in Florida that was an all-black town that was basically burned down, and there was a massacre and all that. And so that was the moment I decided I was going to attend an HBCU. And I chose to. My first choice was Florida A&M, by the way. So hey, shout out to FAMU. But God saved me, because I don't think I would have survived FAMU, and He sent me to Hampton instead, because Hampton had out by 5, and so I wasn't playing there. But all of those steps led me into where I am now, being at Hampton, some of the interactions, some of the conversations I've had. And so that's how I got involved. And I really have a passion to see the church united. And we can't be united until we uproot some of the divisiveness through systematic racism.
Awesome. Awesome. So we lost Kristin for a second, but hopefully she'll come back soon. So actually, Corey, I'm going to start with you, and we all see now why he is the master of these conversations with relational values. So I am going to read really quickly. So the King Center has this guide that I found called Beloved Community Talks. And I actually found this shortly after that meeting with you, Corey. So it just all tied in. So they define courageous conversations as conversations that are designed to promote understanding, address forgiveness, encourage positive behavior modification activities, and influence equitable change to the national and global infrastructure. And the goal of these conversations is that so that our communities can be healthy, because when our communities are healthy, then we can actually come up with solutions that can really bridge the racial divide and address the pains and unrest of racism in a historical context. And so when Corey, that conversation you had with that lady from the Doors of the Confederate was absolutely just skillful. So, with what you just talked about and the things you could share, and time is moving fast. We only got 30 minutes, so we want to make sure everyone has the time to share. But just about your experience of the things you've learned that works with courageous conversations, maybe even any challenges that you've had. And after you share, Corey, I'd just like, anyone can jump in and just kind of share your experience with having these courageous conversations.
Yeah, great question. And it's so funny because I remember the conversation. I don't remember her wearing the Daughters of the Confederate thing. So, that is so funny.
She didn't. She said she was a member. Okay. She didn't have anything on that said she was attached, but when she was showing us her flags, she said that she was Hispanic. She became passionate about making flags. Yeah.
I don't remember seeing that because that would have taken me back. But I remember that conversation. And I think one of the things that makes us be able to, my kids have escaped. You guys go back with mommy. My kids just
That's
escaped.
Perfectly fine, no problem.
So one of the things that for me, there's two things. Number one is my makeup, the way that God has wired me. I am a person that seeks harmony. I'm a reconciler. And so I've taken personality tests. And so by my nature, God has wired me for that. And so I think for people that are going to facilitate these types of conversations, I think there is some divine calling in this. Now, everybody can learn. There's some skills to having courageous conversations. You can learn the skills. There's relational language. But I do think if you're going to be in a space where you're called to bring people that may be at odds with one another, there is a certain level of calling and skill that you need to have before you step into that place. If not, you can actually cause greater harm and damage to either side if you're not prepared properly. And so I think skill is something. And then other aspects that I think are important for courageous conversations, what the Bible says is be quick to listen. Oh my gosh, if we would just do that, one thing right there is be quick to listen and slow to speak, that would cut down 90% of just the craziness that's going on. If you just take time to listen. And so it may seem simple, and that may seem like, well, it can't be that simple. It really is. Now, is it easy to do that? That's a whole nother side of things, because our tendency is to seek to be understood before we're understanding, and we've got to flip that on its head and say, I want to seek to understand before I seek to be understood. So those are a few pieces that I would say, but it is possible to learn the skill of having courageous conversations.
Awesome. Good stuff. Anybody else who wants to jump in next and kind of tell their experience?
One thing I will share is, in particular, I learned this in a work environment. It felt like sometimes people would bait you on the hot topics of the thing to kind of get your perspective. I work in at one point in a very white evangelical Christian environment, very male heavy, and all I am is Christian, right? I'm Black, I'm a woman, I am not conservative. So literally the only thing we had in common was Jesus. And there were conversations. I remember I was kind of baited into a conversation about Colin Kaepernick at the time. And I paused, right, because I could see what was happening. And I asked the person who was trying to get me into this conversation, which I knew would be difficult, because I'm like, I don't know which way you're expecting me to respond, but I know exactly what I want to say. And I asked him, I said, are you really ready for this conversation with me? Because I'm going to be direct. I'm going to be honest. You don't even know how I feel about this. And you're coming at me, quite heavy on a particular side. And so are you ready to hear something other than what you think to be true and to learn? And he paused and he considered it. And he said, you know what? I'm ready to learn something. We can talk about anything if someone is honestly ready to learn. And what I had to recognize in having these conversations is you should give people the option to opt out, right? Because they don't always know what kind of conversation they're getting into when they come at you. They don't know what your thoughts are. They don't know what your experiences are. And so I'm quick to be like, nah, are you sure? Because I feel like this can go another way than what you're expecting. And I'm not going to attack you with that, because you might not be ready to learn. And it will feel like it has the potential, I should say, to feel like an attack, especially coming from a person like me who does not mince words, who is very direct. And so I'm going to give you all these outs on the front end before we engage more deeply, because I don't want you walking away disgruntled. I don't want you walking away hurt. That doesn't help anybody. So I need to know that you're willing to recognize that you might learn something new. And again, he didn't walk away necessarily agreeing with me, but because I am a nerd by default and I have read so much about history and everything else, I was able to give him tons of information, in particular when it comes to that situation and how Black men in the military were treated and all this stuff. And this was a military guy that he had never heard before. And he walked away saying, wow, Kristin, I have never heard this before. You've given me something to look into. And we were able to be good. So I think it's very important to, when you know that you're probably going to come at it from a perspective that the other person is not expecting, to give them the option to walk away, because they don't necessarily know what they walked into.
That's really good. And that's actually, so many people don't know, I am a certified coach. I have my master's degree in leadership coaching. And that's actually a skill they teach us, that when you're giving feedback to a client, don't just give feedback, but first ask their permission for if they want the feedback. Because if they say yes, then you have that buy-in, they're more open. So that's great, to give people the option to opt out of the conversation if they're not ready to learn. That's really awesome. All right, so we got Claire and Dan. Who wants to jump in next? Dan, go right ahead.
Okay.
For me, you have to give people the option of do you want to engage in this? Because this is hard work. And for me lately, I think in the past couple of years, Facebook is such a terrible medium anyways, that I won't really engage with people until at least they're willing to at least read Tasha's book, Be the Bridge. And if you've never read Be the Bridge, read that. It's just a phenomenal manifesto on the whole thing. And it's like, if you're not willing to engage in that, then I'm not going to, well, I'm not saying waste my time, but like, that sounds wrong, but like, I really want to work with people that really want to know and understand this. And I think for me, to me, it's more about my interior work, and the work that Christ has had to do in me to simply state my truth and not to just try to win or be right. Because part of it, I do believe that, if you facts and data, like it's all there. It's not trying to prove something wrong. You're just simply, because you're rooted in Christ, you can just simply state your truth. And it doesn't come about trying to win an argument or trying to prove something. You're just like, and we know 90% of what you say is how you say it, right? And so it's come across as this know-it-all, I'm better than you. And I've seen that in myself as a white person, as a white man, particularly as I've become more woke, become more aware that we can quickly become condescending to what other people who don't quite see it the way we do it. And it's just like, that misses it, because I've been on the journey for 15 years, and man, I'm still learning. I'm still realizing how much the sin of white supremacy has conditioned me, and the need for constantly bring this thing to God. And so I think patience. In the past month, I've had so much conversation. So many people reach out, and there's an opening there in the church now that there's never been before. Unfortunately, it's taken all of this Ahmaud, George Floyd, it's just all of these things for people, for their eyes to be open. And so I think it's a matter of patience, and here's the big thing, and this is one of the things that I love about what I've learned a lot from following Black leaders, is a real reliance upon the Holy Spirit's work. Not trying to formalize things, not trying to and this is what we in the white majority culture do. Like, give me a process, give me steps. Like, no, this is not about that. Like, listen to the Holy Spirit. Like, and I think there's a level of that, and a lot of it is, I can read people really well, and I can tell if their body posture is not engaging in this conversation. And I can kind of tell their willingness. Like last week, I had a family member stop by, and this is a family member. We've never had any conversations about race. And he's an older white male, super awesome guy. We instantly, he just wanted to know what was going on, and just was a great conversation. His body posture was very much of humility and learning. And so for me, it's a combination of a lot of those different elements.
Very awesome. Thank you. That's good.
Yeah,
That's
that
good.
is good. You all
Be the Bridge.
And I just tell him to go
listen to
What?
Yes. Read Jade Lee's book.
Read
Jade Lee's book.
Go read Jade Lee's book, Ferguson Dilemma. It'll tell you everything you need to know.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I'm going to say this about that book, and then Claire, I'm going to say something about our first meeting before you go.
Oh, okay.
I have studied a lot of Black history. I mean, my very first Bible had Black people in it. So I've been studying Black history since I could read, since I was 5. I've taken chematology, and I have to say, even for me, Jade's book was a hard read. Like, she is spitting facts, she is giving stories, and like you really have to take it in. It's a really good read, just very well written. So shout out to Jade Lee's book, The Ferguson Dilemma. Now, Claire, what I love about Claire, the very first time we had lunch, Claire does not play about this word. Claire is serious about anti-racist words. She is not coddling white supremacy at all. She is going to give it to you straight. And so I just love her for that. So yes, please share your thoughts on your experience with having courageous conversations.
Well, thank you so much. You all make such great points. I mean, Corey, what you first said about just the listening and the slowing down, I have found that to be really key And even though it is really hard, especially for white people who are just really not comfortable with anything uncomfortable, really, they don't lament, it's a big part of our culture is to be disconnected, to be disembodied, to be, separated from our humanity. And so just the slowing down piece and the listening, I find, is key, even when it is difficult. For myself too, I'm still and will forever be working on that. And then, Kristin, I was loving what you were saying about giving people beforehand, just saying like, are you ready? Or like, do we have enough time here? Like, let's be real. Like, I know you're wanting to quickly ask me something, but this is something that I would like to reserve some real time for, and yeah. And I was thinking to Dan, a lot of what you said too. I don't want to like leave out what you said of it, like, but I find questioning really helpful in any conversations I have with white people, especially because it's a very non-threatening approach to getting at the bottom of something. I kind of just try to keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper until we reach the heart of the matter, the heart of whatever it is. And so I always try to, as I want to push forward and I want to engage more in something that someone has said, I find that if you put it in the form of a question, it just usually goes over better. It lands better. And it's not an attack, and it allows for kind of a more open verbal processing. They feel like they're verbal processing along with you. If I'm saying, I wonder what was it that made that come up? Or I wonder if you ever experienced this as a child that is making you have this particular bias, or whatever it is. And then most recently, I have found that kind of more of a something that I'm kind of more uniquely built for. Corey, you talked about how you're wired. I'm just finding that I am something more unique that I'm able to give is having to do with really exploring the emotional reaction and the psychological reaction of things. So, and I've done a lot of, I'm not a therapist, but I've been in therapy a lot, and I've done a lot of sitting with things. I've learned a lot about trauma, a lot about embodiment, and it really lends itself well to these types of conversations. If you can say, let's stop for a minute. What do you feel? Do you feel a tension in your body? Do you feel your stomach like getting anxious, that kind of flipping stomach type feeling? Bringing people back into their body, and not going overboard with it, but just in the moment, stopping and saying, let's think about what we're feeling and explore it. Don't dismiss it, because so much of whiteness is about dismiss it, put up your defenses, don't feel anything bad. We don't know how to do it. We've done, generations and generations of perpetuating all kinds of forms of oppression. Facing truth and facing history is very painful, and white people do not, it's not just that they don't like to or want to, but they don't know how. So I'm just finding more recently that that's really helpful, just even, like I say, I'm not an expert, I'm not a therapist, but helping white people to understand that yes, if you let this truth in, it will be horrible, but it'll be okay. And we're going to move. We're going to learn. You're going to learn how to be an anti-racist, and you can be a part of moving forward. So that's just kind of and that's kind of a newer thing for me. All of that. So.
Can I say something on the tail end of that? And I think this is so important. Yeah. And it's probably not very popular, especially from a Black perspective, but having compassion for the generational patterns that white people find themselves in. And so what I mean by this, and Jay talks about this in her book, is that just like there's, some people call generational curses biblically, generational patterns is a euphemism for the same thing. But these patterns we see from generation to generation, well, white people in America have generations of not addressing, deflecting, passing this off, and there's guilt that's underlying there that's been passed down from generations. There's no way that human beings can treat human beings the way that Black people have been treated in America, and that doesn't have some type of emotional effect, even if you're not aware of it. And so you've got that side, what we like to call the emotional cup. You've got the emotional cup of the, usually they talk about that on a personal level, but you have the emotional cup of community. So if you think about what's in the emotional cup, filling the emotions of the white community, you've got this guilt. And one of the things in there is guilt. Well, how do you remove guilt out of your cup? It's through confession. Well, if they don't know that, you've got to have compassion and walk in there and equip them to be able to do that. Same way that Black people have an emotional cup, and theirs is filled primarily with the hurt of what's been done generation after generation. So how do you heal that? You mourn, you comfort pain. And so I think that idea of, and again, this is why you need skill sets if you're going to facilitate these conversations, is I've got to be thinking, that there's a side to white people that they have some patterns that need to be healed. So how can I be a part of that healing? So I just want to throw that in there real quickly, because you said some great things.
Yeah, and I want to tie in what Dan, Claire, and Corey, all what you said. That's what all three of you said is actually what I've learned the most from being in relationship with Dan. When I was working in historic South Atlanta, I was not only able to see the privilege from the side of between whites and Blacks, but even between upper class Blacks and lower class Blacks. And one of the things I realized, Claire, to what you said, is that as a human beings, we don't like pain. And to deal with what has really happened with Black people and other people of color when it comes to slavery, when it comes to the genocide of Native Americans, and all these things that are the result of white supremacy, that is painful to grapple with. And we as humans don't like pain. And so for me, being, Miss Afrocentric fight the power, that helped me to have more compassion, as you said, Corey, for people who have not awakened yet to their privilege and have not awakened yet to how they benefit from oppressive systems. And so just being able to have that compassion. And then what everyone has said, y'all gonna make me do a class on how coaching skills are relevant to courageous conversations. Because that listening, that learning how to ask questions and ask the right questions, those are all skills that I've learned as a coach that you all are saying are helpful in having these courageous conversations. So that's awesome. All right, so we got like 10 minutes left, y'all. This went by really fast. We could go another hour. But what I'm going to do right now is just go through really quickly what the 5 steps that the King Center lays out in the courageous conversations. And then any one of you all can just kind of jump in with your thoughts on how the average day-to-day person can implement those steps. And so let me get my phone back up here. So step 1 is just having a courageous conversation with yourself. Excuse me, which I think we've all, said we've all had to kind of do that with ourselves. And so the King Center defines that as pondering questions. And they actually outline some questions here for self-assessment. So pretty much taking a self-assessment and engaging with dialogue with yourself, looking at your history, looking at maybe those generational curses that allow you to react to certain things a certain way. And then I got a little feedback. So, and then step 2 was setting the tone for the conversation. I know we've talked about, how you say things has a lot to do with how these conversations go. So in this beloved community talks, the King Center talks about setting their environment to one that allows critical thinking and positive problem solving, being able to foster a safe environment that is conducive to constructive conversation, nurturing the needed environment for such a conversation, understanding the dynamic shifts that need to take place. And so, having a welcoming environment. And as you said, giving people the opportunity to opt out if they're not ready to have that conversation. Then step 3 is continuing the conversation. So for me, this is big, like watching my facial expressions, because my face tends to tells it all. So watching your facial expressions, making eye contact, and then being able to be honest with yourself. And then, like you talked about, reading people's body language to kind of see how they're responding, not having to raise your voice and things like that, but just really watching your tone and your body language. Step 4, determine your demographic. We talk about being able to read the room, know who you're talking to, being intentional. We talk a lot about this in One Race, being intentional about engaging with people who are different than yourself, who are a different ethnicity. I know, Dan, we've had conversations of white people submitting to the discipleship of Black people, and being able to agree, to disagree on certain beliefs. You may not agree on everything, but at least being able to listen and consider the other person's perspective, ask questions, respond, acknowledge, and follow up. And then lastly, agreeing to commit. For me, it's like, if you're willing to read a book, like, okay, now you're ready to consider another perspective. Here's a resource that maybe you want to check out or read, or even, I know right now, and I believe it's till the end of June, Jamar Tisby's class, The Color of Compromise, is free on Amazon Prime for people to watch, which is a great course. I actually recommended that to a young person recently. And so being able to agree to some type of commitment after that conversation, even if the commitment is just considering another's perspective. So if anybody wants to jump in with how the average person kind of can incorporate some of these things that you have talked about to have a successful, courageous conversation.
One thing I will add that I think is very critical for everybody involved in this conversation, white, Black, and otherwise, is to learn the fullness of Black history. Everybody starts Black history as slavery. Let me tell you something. We existed for millennia prior to slavery. Slavery is a significant part of the arc of Black people in this world, but it is not the most significant part. And what I have learned from teaching people the beauty of Black history, the positives in Black history, is that it breaks some biases they didn't even realize they had. Right. And so when I've had people tell me, well, what if Black people contributed to society? Well, how long you got? Right. Because I do this, I've done years of study of all of the things that Black people have contributed to society, and so I think it's super important that we start the story at the right place, which is the beginning, not at this point that subjugated a group of people from Africa and made them slaves. I do a lot of conversations like, they didn't take the worst of the worst. They took the best of the best. People who knew how to cultivate the land, who could do, like, those are skills. Can't just anybody do this. You don't want me to build your house. That's not my skill. You see what I'm saying? It's a very, it's a very tangible skill set, but that's a person of high intelligence. Right. And so we even have to help people reframe what they think about those that were enslaved and subjugated to such a cruel aspect of human nature lived out which dignifies those people who survived that time. and it changes the conversation moving forward, because you're not talking about unskilled, untamed humans who they grabbed and made civilized. You're talking about highly skilled, highly intelligent people who are smart enough to be able to survive so that we can be here today to have the conversation.
That's good. Good stuff. Absolutely. Anybody else want to jump in here?
I think I would
Corey?
say, as far as those 5 things are concerned, how does an everyday person engage those? I think it starts by having genuine relationships. Outside of the context of relationship, it's hard, even if you know all those steps, even if you know all the right things to say, outside of genuine relationship, you're still only gonna scratch the surface of the purpose of these conversations. So I think seeking out those conversations that you have, seeking out conversations with people and real relationships with them, and doing life together. Because you talk about going back to the beginning, we were created in the image and likeness of God, who is a relational being. He's existed in relationship. God has existed in relationship from eternity past, and so we are created for relationship, and it's in the context of relationship that we really get an understanding and appreciation for what the purpose of these conversations. We get to know one another better, and when you get to know something, you don't fear it, because fear comes from not knowing. And so I think the key to all 5 of those steps, I think, is really pursuing genuine relationship. And if you don't have access to those relationships, there's a practical. If I'm talking to my white brothers and sisters, if you don't have any people of color in your sphere of influence, find someone that is a white person in your sphere of influence that knows somebody that can help you get started, because it wouldn't be advantageous for you to randomly select a random Black person and just try to jump into a conversation like that, because you don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know where their emotional place is. You don't know if they're ready for that conversation. So you've got to be wise about it. And even that is something out of relationship. So those are my thoughts. Relationship.
Yeah, you said something I wanted to bring out about, you not knowing who you're dealing, you don't know where they are emotionally. I know for me, like, to do this work and to be able to have those conversations, I've had to watch what I expose my spirit to. So like the updated version of The Roots, the Book of Negroes, all those shows and movies that have come out like since Trayvon Martin, probably I have not watched, because I'm like, they just gonna make me upset. I'm not gonna be able to do this work effectively. And so and at the same time, like, it's my history. I know my history. I'm good. So I don't need to watch that, to learn my history. So for me to effectively do this work, I've even had to guard my spirit, and being honest with myself about things that put me in a bad headspace or put me in a bad place, where I'm not able to effectively listen to the spirit and have these conversations and do this work effectively. So I think even, as a Black woman, I have to be very, very careful of, what I expose myself to. Even with the news, like, before I wouldn't watch the news just because it's always so negative, but it's like now we're in a whole pandemic, so I have to watch the news, but I have to be very careful, about taking breaks and things like that. So I thought that was a good point that I just wanted to bring out as well. All right, so Claire and Dan.
I agree. I'll probably just echo what Corey said about the relationship. And I find for everyday people, if I'm thinking about everyday people with these steps, like for step number 5 kind of jumps out at me about the commitment. And speaking in terms of white people in the conversation or new to the conversation, the commitment piece is really key, because for white people, they can easily say, I don't feel good. I don't want to go any farther with this, so I'm out. And I'm going to retreat back into white bubble land, and I'm not coming back. Which, that's happens. And I've seen it happen plenty of times. And so that commitment piece, I think is key. And recently, I know we're about to run out of time, but I recently had the honor, since I've moved down here, I saw this done nearly perfectly from a Black woman who's in the group I'm in right now. We're just going through a book study, but the way that she presented her desire for the rest of the women in the group to commit, the white women, was just so beautiful and grace-filled and near perfect. I'm telling you, it was just a call for I'm getting distracted by these messages over here. It was a call for, I've shared this with you. Now you see something that is sacred that I've shared with you, and I hope that this doesn't stop right here. And it was not any kind of pressure. It was totally genuine. Like I say, so grace-filled, very supernatural, the words that she used. And I feel like, and we just met last night, so this is fresh on my mind. I feel like it was the single most powerful thing that was shared from anyone else, because it gives us direction. It gives us, that accountability piece as well, because it is something that white people can do. They can just say, I'm out.
That's good. That's really good. Thank you all. So yeah, we are going to go over, because this conversation is so good. This happened the last time with Jade. These conversations are so good. But Dan, would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think this whole idea of elevating leaders of color, and really, I think the language that Be the Bridge uses is called decentering yourself from the conversation. I think that's a huge piece in this, and being an ally, and constantly pointing to leaders and people of color, Josh Clemens, Lorson, obviously Jaden Corey and their work, and just constantly using my privilege, and just constantly pointing people. I think that's one of the pieces of courageous conversations for me, and then just sharing. I think because it's not my story, right? It's not my trauma, but I'm there. I can see it. And there was like 6 or 7 years ago, I was actually doing a Dignity Serves training, was the training that it is, and Malcolm was actually with me, Lavonya, and we were talking about race. And Malcolm loves those conversations. So if and it's not every person of color wants to have that conversation, but Malcolm loves to be in those spaces. And so I invited him to come, and we were getting into talking about race, and an older white gentleman started, the phrase he used is, when we started talking about this, he's like, aren't we adding fuel to a smoldering fire by continuing to talk about these conversations? And I'm about to stand up and go nuts on him. Malcolm took the conversation over and did a great job and just talked about his experience. And because he wanted to, and he did a phenomenal job. It just was neat because, he shared from his own personal experience, and it really helped the group to kind of get it. So I'm a big one within conversations, constantly to people of color, and again, a plug for Tasha's book, Be the Bridge. If you've never read that, read that. And Jade's book as well, Ferguson Dilemma. And then also check out what One Race is doing, oneracemovement.com. Oh yeah, supposed to announce the march on Friday. Sorry, Lavonya. Supposed to do that in the beginning. On Friday, we're doing a huge march. It's been amazing. 2 weeks ago, we decided to do this, and it's come together. So it's been amazing. And so shoot me an email or a Facebook message if you want the details. We have an Eventbrite to sign up. Be the Bridge will be there with a tent. There'll be a lot of other people. We're expecting around 6,000 to 7,000 people in Millennium Park, and then we'll walk over to Liberty Plaza and then walk back, and we'll hear some really, really cool voices. Obviously, you'll hear from Josh and Hazen. Justin Gibney of the Ant Campaign will be there. Latasha will be there as well. Lee Jenkins, Crawford Loritz, a lot of really key, influential Black leaders in Atlanta. So.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Y'all have, this has been really good. Y'all have shared some good points. I'm just so thankful. So we talked about the importance of listening, the importance of giving people the option to opt out of the conversation if they're not ready to learn. We've talked about being compassionate. We've talked about using relational conversations. All these things have just been such good points that people really can implement. And so, again, I encourage people, read Be the Bridge by Latasha Morrison, The Ferguson Dilemma by Jade Lee. Please participate if you can. Unfortunately, I'll be traveling, so I won't be able to be there. But participate in One Race's March on Atlanta this Friday, June 19th. And I want to really plug June 19th because it is catching fire and I'm so excited. Friday is Juneteenth. It is the day that Black people, we lost our chains, that we were emancipated from slavery. And for me personally, this is so important because, like I said, I went to Hampton University. And on our campus, we have what is called the Emancipation Oak. And the Emancipation Oak is the place that the Emancipation Proclamation was first read to the slaves in Virginia. And so, we love the Emancipation Oak as Hamptonians. And so Juneteenth is a huge day for us. So I encourage you to participate in One Race March. Here in Atlanta, there are a lot of different Juneteenth activities going on. So if you just search on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram for hashtag Juneteenth, I'm sure you'll find a lot of events to celebrate and participate. I'm so thankful that so many companies are incorporating this as a day off for their employees. So that's really dope. So as we close, we're going over any final thoughts, and I'll go kind of in the order that I see you. So Corey, any final thoughts that you would like to share about having courageous conversations and why these conversations are important to move us forward? So again, so that our communities can be healthy and so that we can be healthy.
Sure. My final thoughts are, I like how Jesus said, come, let's reason together. Mm-hmm. And if we as Christians are going to follow the footsteps of Christ, then we have to model that same idea as coming and reasoning together. Jesus shared the table with a man he knew was going to betray him, but he still brought him to the table. We can't determine all the outcomes of everything, but we can commit to coming to the table. So my final thoughts.
That's awesome. Claire, if you wouldn't mind sharing next, please.
Yeah, sure. My final thoughts are just to do it, to go for it, just do it. And it's difficult, but so worth it. And it's one of those things that can be scary, but all things, it's kind of like the old saying, most things that are worth doing aren't easy, are scary. So that's not y'all know the old saying I'm trying to say, and I'm not saying it right, but so yeah, just do it. Just go for it.
Awesome. Kristin. you could go next.
Sure. I encourage all of us to be ever listening, ever learning, and sometimes speaking. Like, just focus on the listening and the learning part. And in particular, if you want to call yourself an ally to any community, right? You don't get to call yourself that. That's a name that is bestowed upon you by the community you are being a co-conspirator for. And the only way you get that designation is by first being willing to listen and learn, so that when you do speak, what you say actually makes sense.
So good. Thank you, Kristin. Dan the man. Final thoughts. Close us out.
Yeah, I think real quick, the one race transformational journey that Josh came up with a couple years ago, I think is really good. Be the Bridge kind of uses the same format. Other people use the same thing, but it's know the story, own the story, change the story. And so those three things are constantly working. And so know the story. To Kristin's point, know the story, like know how we're here, own the story within us, do the work, own the discrepancies that were created, the injustices, and then through the power of the gospel, change the story. So I think that those are always working at all the time. And I think we always want to jump to changing the story, but you can't change the story until you know and you own the story. And all of this is, again, through the power of the gospel, sitting in the scriptures, read the book of Acts. This is nothing that the early church wasn't working through. They were working through racial, class, cultural differences all throughout the book of Acts. A lot of Paul's letters for that. And so that's my final thought.
Awesome, y'all. This was so good. I love y'all. So thank you so much, Corey. Thank you, Kristin. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you guys so much. I appreciate the work that you do. If I don't get to tell you again, you all are all heroes to me. And I definitely look up to you all in this work. And I'm just so thankful to be in relationship with you all. And we have our wonderful Remerge director, Andy, on here. So I will just echo publicly his sentiments to thank you for the work that you do and for contributing to this panel. And if there's anything Remerge can do to support you, please let us know. I would encourage you all again to attend the One Race March on Atlanta on Friday. Thank you all for those who have watched us live here on Facebook. The recording will be up in our group. Invite your friends to the group to engage. We share a lot of information in the group. Sometimes the conversations get a little spicy, but that's what we're all here for, to listen and to learn. So again, I just thank you all so much. Thank you for letting me go over a little bit because this was so good. We're probably going to have to do this again because this is great. And so everyone have a great week. Have a good weekend. I will be in Virginia next week by the beach. Thank God. I can't wait. For the beach. So everyone have a good night. And we thank you so much again for joining the community of Reconcilers for our very first Creative Insight. We hope that you took some practical steps that you can implement in your everyday life to begin to have these courageous conversations so that we can have a thriving and flourishing community. So thank you all so much. Have a good night.
Thanks, Lavonya.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.